Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenos días. Gracias a todos por acompañarnos en este webinar realizado en conjunto con BOMA Canadá. Mi nombre es Elsa Yáñez, presidente de BOMA México en el periodo 2020-2021 y les doy la más cordial bienvenida. Como siempre, y para las personas que nos visitan por primera vez, quiero mostrarles un poco de lo que hace nuestra asociación, que este año está cumpliendo 30 años de existencia. La Asociación Mexicana del Edificio Inteligente y Sustentable es una asociación en donde integramos conocimiento, innovación y tecnología para desarrollar edificaciones y sustentables en México. Lo hacemos a través de membresías, a través de nuestro diplomado que ya lleva más de 25 años de impartirse, pero también lo hacemos a través de talleres y webinars. Asimismo, este año tuvimos la oportunidad de celebrar el premio BOMA y estamos muy alegres de haber podido celebrar la edificación inteligente y sustentable de mayor nivel en México. Por el otro lado, como capítulo de BOMA en México, promovemos las mejores prácticas en el desarrollo inmobiliario a través de capacitaciones, entre las cuales destaca BOMA Estándares de Medición de Oficinas y el curso BBSP, que es para profesionales de sustentabilidad de la certificación BOMA Best. Asimismo, la certificación BOMA 360, encabezada por BOMA International, y BOMA Best, encabezada por BOMA Canadá. La relación que tenemos nosotros como IMEI y BOMA está en el premio IMEI BOMA, en donde los ganadores son acreedores a un sitio durante los TOBY Awards, que significa The Outstanding Building of the Year. Nuestros asociados incluyen una gama muy importante de la cadena de valor de la industria del inmobiliario en México, desde de los fabricantes hasta los usuarios finales, pasando por instaladores, contratistas de control y firmas de arquitectura. Dentro de nuestras alianzas estratégicas tenemos la oportunidad de convivir con varias asociaciones de la industria de las instalaciones para las ciudades, las edificaciones y la infraestructura. Asimismo, del lado inmobiliario tenemos alianzas muy importantes como lo son con Amefibra, la AMPIP, el ICEI y el World Resource Institute. Quisiera comentarles brevemente acerca de unas tendencias, las 5 tendencias principales que están redefiniendo al sector inmobiliario y las tecnologías asociadas, dentro de las cuales destacan redefinir el propósito de la edificación. Es decir, en IMEI BOMA nos estamos planteando para qué va a volver la gente a los espacios y cómo estos tienen que ser concebidos, si se están pensando en nuevos espacios o redefiniendo los actuales. Y es por esto que debemos pensar fuera de la caja. La segunda tendencia es la calidad ambiental interior, entre la cual no solamente es importante el confort térmico, pero también la calidad del aire interior, la calidad de la iluminación y el bajo ruido que se deba tener en los interiores. La inteligencia artificial es la tendencia que nos va a ayudar a que todas las otras tendencias estén tecnificadas y obviamente dentro de las tendencias encontramos el machine learning, el Internet de las cosas, la realidad aumentada y los gemelos digitales. Todas estas herramientas posibilitarán que las otras tendencias sean una realidad y sean para el beneficio de los seres humanos. La cuarta tendencia es el wellness o el bienestar, entre la cual nos ha enseñado esta pandemia que al ser una pandemia de tipo humano, debemos poner al ser humano en el centro de nuestras preocupaciones. Y dentro de ello, los inmuebles deben estar preparados para considerar de manera importante el bienestar de los usuarios, tanto en la mente como en el espíritu, como físicamente. La quinta y última tendencia habla acerca de los aspectos ambientales, sociales y de gobernanza. Y es aquí en donde nosotros estamos poniendo especial énfasis en las certificaciones ambientales porque creemos que maximizará el valor de los inmuebles y asimismo se podrán lograr que las otras 4 tendencias brillen y sean demostradas. Es así como IMEI BOMA está haciendo su contribución a la sociedad mexicana. Y muchísimas gracias por su asistencia. Espero que disfruten de esta charla y les dejo los datos de contacto de Ale Villarroel, nuestra directora ejecutiva, y de Arlet Novoa, nuestra coordinadora de operaciones. Y ahora me voy a permitir presentar a Benjamin Scheinwald. Hola, Benjamin.
Hola,
Benjamin
hola.
el Childwell es el presidente y director ejecutivo de la Asociación de Propietarios y Administradores de Edificios, BOMA por sus siglas en inglés, de Canadá. Entre otras cosas, las responsabilidades de Benjamin incluyen a BOMA Best, el programa de certificación y evaluación ambiental líder en Canadá para el sector inmobiliario comercial. Durante su mandato, BOMA Best ha crecido rápidamente y ahora se está expandiendo por todo el mundo. Antes de unirse a BOMA en 2012, Benjamin se desempeñó como director ejecutivo nacional y consejero general del Congreso Judío Canadiense, antes de ser ascendido a director ejecutivo. Anteriormente, Benjamin sirvió en la oficina del Privy Council y ejerció la abogacía en Torres LLP. También se desempeñó como asistente legal del presidente del Tribunal Supremo de Israel y trabajó para el Partido Demócrata de Hong Kong, la misión canadiense ante la OCDE en París y el club de hockey los Jets de Winnipeg. Benjamin ha ganado varios premios, incluida una beca de Action Canada, que lo nombró uno de los mejores y más brillantes líderes emergentes de Canadá, y una beca del programa de visitantes de la Unión Europea, que lo reconoció como un líder joven y prometedor. Benjamin se educó en la Universidad de Toronto, la London School of Economics, la Universidad de Manitoba y la Universidad Hebrea de Jerusalén. Habla 3 idiomas con fluidez, ha sido publicado repetitivamente en los principales periódicos y ha aparecido como panelista en Al Jazeera. Benjamin participa activamente en la comunidad y forma parte de la junta de BAJAPTA y del Gabinete de Ontario del Museo Canadiense de Derechos Humanos. Anteriormente fue copresidente de Leadership Sanaya y en el Sanaya Health System, Mount Sanaya, Hospital de Toronto. Él vive con su esposa y con sus 2 hijas en Toronto. Muchísimas gracias, Benjamin. Te dejamos los micrófonos.
Thank you so much, Elsa. Gracias. And it's great to see you and to see so many friends here. I wish we could do it in person, and that time will come. I can't wait to return to Mexico in person one of these days. I think here we go with the screen sharing. So what I was hoping to do for the next half hour, 45 minutes, is spend some time talking about smart buildings and what we've learned about smart buildings in some of the work that we've done here at BOMA Canada, and then hopefully leave a little bit of time for discussion, question and answer before the hour is up. So I will say that I myself am learning about this topic. I'm not an expert, but I think we're now at a point where we can say intelligent things about intelligent buildings, if you'll pardon the little joke, the little pun. And hopefully together we can advance this important area of an emerging area of our business. Next slide. So I'll just wait for the next slide. One minute here as they change the slide. Thank you very much. Okay, so on the agenda today are topics like the ones you see on the screen, and I'll just go over this quite quickly. Back to work, return to work after the pandemic is going to happen one way or the other, and we think that smart buildings will be a big part of that discussion. Sustainability, and I'll add in well-being here as well, are 2 issues that are intimately tied into smart buildings. These are not standalone issues, sort of sustainability, well-being, and smart, although I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. They're actually quite connected to each other, and where one drives the other. Technology and innovation, of course, are at the heart of smart buildings overall. And then the sort of the other side of the coin, the challenge that comes with smart buildings is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity deals with all the risk that comes from smart buildings, whereas technology and innovation drives the benefit. Next slide. There's a small delay. So I guess one place to start is that historically, buildings have been fundamentally about space. At the end of the day, BOMA members in Canada and BOMA members in Mexico and around the world are in the business of selling space. You own space, you rent it out, and tenants pay you income, rent for that space. And that was a pretty simple and basic business model for many, many decades, if not centuries. And it was a model that didn't really change dramatically until the last few years, where new issues started to arise, new considerations, new demands for space, and the quality of the space mattered more than in the past. In the past, maybe the location mattered, but beyond that, there weren't huge considerations. Perhaps for a real remarkable building, architecture might matter, but fundamentally, it was renting space for your needs. And if you think about the sort of famous American and actually British TV show, The Office, that to my mind is the quintessential, the idea of the show is the quintessential plain office. There was nothing special about that physical space, but the people in the show were what made it so special and why it was such a famous show. And smart buildings and all the other trends happening now are fundamentally about the people and the building. So you're starting to see a trend where tenants are demanding smart building technology and smart building amenities, you can call it that. And that's mattering in some cases as much, if not more, than the location of the building, the beauty of the building, some of the amenities of the building, and even in some cases, the sustainability of the building, although, as I said before, they ultimately go hand in hand. Next slide. So, as we return from COVID, and I know that, I think Mexico is still very much like Canada, working from home. I know that every country, including Canada, has its challenges right now. But we all know that sooner or later, we're going to return to the office in some manner, be it altogether or in a hybrid model or whatever. And we're going to return to the office with a new relationship between the people and the building that was not there pre-COVID. So, sure, there were people who cared about things like indoor air quality, and there was an emerging movement around health and wellness. But the impact of the building on the experience, on the health, on the enjoyment of the individual who works there, or in some cases lives there or shops there, is going to be way higher as we emerge from COVID-19 than it was before anybody had heard of COVID-19. And we believe that smart buildings can play a role in reassuring the tenants that they can return to a building with some confidence in the safety and security of the building, that the workplace is safe. We believe that smart buildings can promote health and well-being. They drive that. It's not an independent thing, but it's connected. We believe that tenants will demand it because their employees will ask to be in smart buildings, even if they don't call them smart buildings. Our tenants' employees, especially younger employees, which they hire out of university or earlier in their career, will demand to have certain smart building attributes in their workplace, and they will pick employers who will in turn lease space inside smart buildings. Smart buildings are extreme. They are themselves an amenity. They provide new services that weren't there before, but they also drive other amenities, booking conference rooms, booking gyms, providing food services and the like. And as I said before, they drive the environmental mission of the building. Next slide, please. So what is a smart building is a really obvious question, and it is deceptively hard to answer. And that's a strange thing for someone like me to say, who is presenting on this topic, and as you'll see a little bit later in the presentation, building a program for your use to manage and capture the benefits and mitigate the risks of smart buildings. But the truth is that while it says here on the screen, smart buildings enable and automate a more informed decision process by sharing information, and it enhance wellness and experience for the user through seamless operations, and it's all underpinned by technology. We don't really have yet a single common definition, or maybe a better word is a single common standard around what makes a building smart. And to my mind, this is quite a similar situation to what sustainability in commercial real estate had, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. 20 years ago or so, when people like you guys and my members here in Canada were beginning to realize, hey, I'm hearing a lot about sustainability in real estate. What is sustainability, and how do we become sustainable? Because I think my tenants might demand it, or my owners might demand it. And at the time, it was sort of a situation where different companies, even leading companies, were doing different things. Company X might be focused on recycling, company Y on energy efficiency, company Z maybe on gardens and water in and around the building. And there was not a single benchmark, a single standard for how to define and benchmark a given building's performance in relation to sustainability. Well, that now is old hat. We have that, of course, many of you know our BOMA Best Sustainable Buildings program, which we're so proud of, that has created that benchmark, and that enables companies to sort of compare themselves to the competition and plan their own work plans and their own capital investments to drive towards a measurable outcome in sustainability. So all that is to say, that's what I really believe is happening right now at the earliest stages with smart buildings. Company X is focusing on cybersecurity. Company Y might be focusing on artificial intelligence. Company Z may be focusing on automation. Pardon me. And there's not a single common view of what makes excellent, good, not as good, or whatever rank it. When it comes to a smart building. And a little bit later in the program, I'll talk about a very important initiative that we're piloting right now that aims to fix that problem so that there is a common global benchmark. We know what we're talking about when we talk about what a smart building is, and we know how to make our buildings smarter and better because of that benchmark, because of that pathway that is currently emerging that we're excited to be a part of. Next slide. So all that being said, there are certainly some items in smart buildings that are not controversial. And there's 5 items here on the screen. You might have 6, you might have 4, but in general, these are the areas we think that matter when you are discussing smart building technology. They're not the same things as what you assess when you're benchmarking what a smart building is. I'll get to that a little bit later. But we think that things like the 5 items you see here, first, 5G technology. 5G, at least in Canada, was a really big deal. It's been a little bit lost in the shuffle of public consciousness because of COVID-19, but it's coming, and it's going to revolutionize these things and more. As we not only do things bigger and faster, but it really will change the way that information technology can be processed. It's not only a massive leap forward in speed, it will actually enable us to do more things. And how we capture that in and around commercial buildings is unclear right now. There will be actual physical considerations. Cables might be laid inside our buildings to enable our tenants to capture 5G technology. And I mean, this will change from country to country based on regulation and law and culture, but it's not even clear who will own those cables. Will it be the property owner manager? Will it be the telecoms company, et cetera? But 5G technology is the future, and it's not the distant future, it's the near future. And so now is the time to start getting ready for that. IoT, Internet of Things. This is a buzzword, of course, to be sure, but it's very, very, very real. The connection of internet-enabled devices to each other is expanding at a spectacular rate. And inside a building, that can have enormous opportunities. I read somewhere a while ago that something like the average household, and I forget the exact number in Canada, has something like 35 or 40 IoT devices in it. And I said, that can't be true. That just seems like so ridiculous. And then I started thinking about my own house with, my wife and 2 kids. And I said, okay, well, we have, 4 laptops, and we have 3 phones, and we have 3 or 4 tablets, and my television works off the internet, and my alarm system for the house works off the internet, and my thermostat works off the internet. And I was going on and on. I can change as many of you can, I'm sure, I can turn the air conditioning on or off on my phone. And all of a sudden I realized that it seeped into my house in a way that I hadn't realized, that I probably had a couple of dozen internet-enabled devices talking to each other in many cases. That's my little house. Apply that to a building with all the operations, all the people, all the amenities, all the complications, and you can sort of see how strong that can be. Digital twinning is a concept that enables you to effectively create a digital twin. You take a profile of a building, a digital profile. So you're not actually building a new building or creating a physical model, but you're creating a digital twin of the building that mimics, ideally identically, the building. And then you can start experimenting with the digital twin to sort of see, if we changed the HVAC system in this way, if we change the elevator system in that way, what would the impact be in the actual building? And so the digital twin becomes this sort of amazing experimental opportunity for seeing how to improve building performance. Artificial intelligence, I think you all know what that's about. That's about machine learning. That's about the ability of technology to improve operations and to improve experience and to reduce cost and to drive efficiency. I'm talking in terms of commercial real estate without human interaction. So it's an enormous advantage in terms of the efficiency of our operations, not only of the building, but of our companies, and it's growing every day. And then finally, edge computing. I confess I'm not an expert on edge computing in particular, but edge computing, as I understand it, speeds up computing processes by bringing it local to the building. And I'm learning about that still, but that's an area that we think is going to be in smart building technology going forward. Next slide. Just give it a second to turn. So what are some of the functionalities of smart buildings? You see 3 of them here on the screen. It may not be exhaustive, but security and monitoring. So, we just got a notice, though we're not back in the building yet because of COVID. We'll go back soon. And I have here in my wallet, just off the screen, my little pass card. Everyone has these white pass cards that you tap to get into your building. Well, my building in downtown Toronto is moving away from those pass cards and is going to actually embed the access to the building in our phones. And so you can imagine things like opening gates, be they in parking, be they in the turnstiles to get into a building, in retail centers, for shoplifting. There's a whole series of surveillance and security that can come from smart buildings that, just is so much ahead of having human eyes watching it or taking out an old-fashioned key. It almost sounds quaint. So the ability to secure and monitor your property rises dramatically in a smart building. Energy management, a huge issue in commercial real estate, arguably the issue of the 21st century in our industry and in the world, because of the need to decarbonize our building off of carbon-intensive grids and off of carbon-intensive operations. And smart buildings allow you to, as simple as a sensor in an office, turn the lights off when the individual isn't there. That turns on automatically when you walk into the room, all the way to the breadth and depth of the guts of the building, the major operations of HVAC, of elevators, of other things. The more you can manage that, the better it is for your energy, and of course, the better it is for the business efficiency, the economic efficiency of the building as well. And then smart infrastructure management. So this is the ability to connect tenants together to manage the infrastructure of the building. So for instance, this is not new technology, but and I'm sure it happens in Mexico as much as in Canada. You can now have, let's say, the CEO of the biggest tenant in your building enter the parking garage in the morning, and either through a transponder or through reading the individual's license plate, the system knows that the person is there, this VIP is there, and the parking arm comes up just at the right time to the car pass through and sort of guides all the systems allow the person to park his or her car, let's say at the VIP spot, and they know that it takes the person 23 seconds to walk from her or his car to the elevator. So 23 seconds later, the elevator is waiting for that person because the time is important. And the elevator takes the person up to the office, and the HVAC system has the temperature in his or her office ready as he or she likes it. And maybe even before too long, like in the Jetsons TV show of the 60s, the coffee is poured hot as he or she arrives at the office. So that's happening now. Coffee aside, it's happening now. If it's happening for the CEO of the biggest tenant in the building, it isn't that much more expensive to apply that across the entirety of the building and to drive elevators more efficiently and parking more efficiently and HVAC more efficiently by enabling the smart building opportunities that come with smart buildings. Next slide. So attributes of a smart building. I mean, again, this may be, you might agree or disagree on this or that item, but in general, we think that they're insightful. You learn about the building, things that you didn't know before. You learn patterns. Why is there people congregating in this part of the retail area at this time? Or you didn't know they were congregating in this part of the retail area at this time, and you can reposition the retail as a result. Or you had no idea that elevators are used more intensively between these floors and not across the whole building. So there's a data component to it, obviously. They're more sustainable. As I talked before, you can manage your profile of energy, water, et cetera, anything that's expended in the building, and you can turn things on and off on a quick change. They're flexible. You can provide services and amenities faster to tenants. And so, for example, we're not too far away from the classic issue in Canada, as people complain, maybe in Mexico too. It's too cold in the office. It's too hot in the office. We have extreme weather, of course, in Canada. Well, we still have people coming up with wrenches to fix it, but that can be predictively done or done remotely through technology. They're experiential. You experience the building in a different way. I like my office this way, and Elsa likes it that way. And so because I like my office cold and she likes it hot or whatever it is, we can have different experiences next door to each other in the same office because of the enabling of technology. They drive healthfulness. Indoor air quality has never been more important in the era of COVID than it is right now. The ability to monitor HVAC systems, to monitor, MERV filters, to monitor actual indoor air quality with sensors and other aspects is only driven forward dramatically by technology and smart buildings. They're productive. People are more productive when they can be in an environment that supports them at their best, where they can have the experience that they want, where they know they're being well maintained, where they feel better. They're efficient. I think I don't have to go into that too deeply, but for all the reasons I've described in terms of energy efficiency and other things, and they're resilient. And resilient, I tend to mean resilient to climate change, and that will depend on where you are. And I think in Mexico, the key issue I think is earthquakes, which isn't really climate change necessarily, but it's still an environmental resiliency. I wouldn't pretend to speak to that, but in Canada, the key issue here is flooding. We get spring flooding when the snow melts every year, as well as forest fires with dirty air. And you can do things in a smart building that you couldn't otherwise do. There's a really awesome building in Toronto that's built in a riverbed. It's built on purpose in a riverbed, almost dry riverbed. But when it floods once in a while, the building's elevators are designed automatically with an intelligent system to go up to a higher floor. And that way they won't get flooded. And those simple outcomes can be done through the attributes of a smart building. Next slide. So the business case to drive smart buildings, one I talked about before, benchmarking the building. Right now, no one knows if their building is smarter than their neighbor. No one knows how much how smart their building is because there's no standard. And I'll be talking about that in a moment. We're going to have a standard for you very, very soon. Future proofing. You know, we all know that this demand is insatiable, and that the more we invest in technology today, the better positioned we are to capture its benefits for our businesses, for our tenants, for our owners tomorrow. Smart maintenance. I mean, again, you know, the maintenance cost of predictive maintenance of fixing things or tending to things before they break because sensors tell you, and deploying people keeps happier tenants. You don't have to deal with all the challenges of broken or faulty items. Decreased operational cost. You know, you spend less on all these things. Guess what? You're spending less on operating the building. Improved productivity, I've touched on as well. Reduced carbon footprint. You can see how these are all connected, right? Because the moment you're spending less on HVAC, for instance, you're also spending less on energy, which is going to reduce your carbon footprint. You're reducing the energy consumption or the energy profile of the building. And of course, when you do that and nothing else, all you're doing is increasing the asset value. Because by definition, if the building hasn't changed, but it's become less expensive to operate an identical building, by definition, the asset value goes up. So this is good for the owner in that regard as well. And it's good for sustainability too. And as we transition to the next slide, I'll mention an example that I heard of a few years ago, which I thought was amazing, but I actually think it's happening more and more. Maybe it's happening in Mexico too. There are now little sensors, and I'm guessing they're not very expensive, that they're putting into the waste bins, not the individual garbage bins in an office, but into the industrial bin in the loading dock area of the building. And the sensors can tell when the garbage bin is full. And the sensor then automatically calls the waste hauling company, the garbage company, to come and pick up the full bin and haul it away. Well, what have you done in that case? You've said instead of coming every Tuesday or whatever they did in the past, they're coming on demand. And so that is going to mean that it's much more efficient. They're going to come, you're going to spend less money on having the garbage pulled away because they're only coming when they're needed, not when it's a regular basis. And you've actually improved your building's sustainability profile because you're having fewer trucks on the road coming to the building, or when they come, they're coming in a more efficient manner. A small example there. Okay. So just to touch base on this slide quickly, you know, the pillars of benefit of smart buildings, they apply to different groups. So it's interesting. Very often, the third-party owner managers, you know, like Colliers, for instance, which I think is sponsoring us today. You know, they're often, I call them, you know, the meat in the sandwich, because they're being pulled in two different directions: the tenants and the owners for whom they work. But what happens so often in our industry is actually the tenants and the owners of the building are actually want the exact same thing. And this is a great example, smart buildings, of where you can make your tenants happier by investing in smart, because they're demanding smart buildings, and their employees, again, are demanding of the tenants, the law firm, the accounting firm, the marketing company, whatever it is, their young employees are demanding these things too. So the third-party manager can satisfy the demands of the tenants while driving all the benefits in terms of higher asset value and ultimately higher rent to the investors, to the owners of this building. And then, you know, in the bottom right-hand corner, everybody ultimately wins because you're driving the environmental profile forward as well. Next slide. So that's the lay of the land in terms of smart buildings and how we see it from BOMA Canada. And so recognizing that this, we think, is what's happening and what's going to happen, we're developing a new program, which we're really excited about, and we're excited to bring it to Mexico, as you'll see in a second. You've heard about BOMA Best, and we talk about BOMA Best, and really what we mean when we say that is BOMA Best sustainable buildings. Well, we're now going to launch a sister program called BOMA Best Smart Buildings. And this is going to be the world's first smart building certification and smart building benchmark, so that all those challenges that I talked about earlier, you know, how do I know if I'm doing better? How do I know if I'm top tier, bottom tier? How do I know if I should invest more in cybersecurity or less in artificial intelligence? how we can finally have a benchmark that brings standardization and a pathway for success into the industry. Next slide, please. So, like all our programs, this is by the industry for the industry. Like IME, BOMA Mexico, BOMA Canada is owned by the industry. We're a membership organization. We're a not-for-profit organization. And so we're simply capturing the views and the desires of our members in asking them, what do you want to see? And do you want to see this program? The answer was a resounding yes. Okay, if you want to see it, help us shape it, make it work for you. And so together, by the industry, for the industry, we're going to create this program that will reflect this aspirational pathway for the industry. Next slide. So the program exists. It's in pilot, and we'll talk about that in a second. But we have 6 areas of assessment. So whereas in the sustainability program, BOMA Best Sustainable Buildings, there's energy efficiency, there's water efficiency, there's waste diversion, and that kind of stuff. In the Smart Buildings program, we have artificial intelligence, we have cyber and physical security, we have data management, we have connectivity, we have health and well-being, and then finally we have sustainability. Those are the 6 areas that we have in the program, which is currently under pilot. Next slide, please. So there's fundamentally 3 areas of questions. Again, this is for those of you who have done BOMA Best Sustainable Buildings. This is not dissimilar. There are fundamental best practices. So everybody should be doing these basic things if you want to have some basic ability to say that you're a smart building. Then there are core questions. So the more advanced questions, but the ones that aren't extraordinarily high. And then finally, there are what we're calling innovation or boost questions to reward those buildings which really are pushing the envelope and taking risks and putting in genuinely cutting edge technologies. Next slide. So the steps to certification, there are 5 steps. And again, this is kind of similar to the main BOMA Best sustainability program. The pre-screen is really basically just making sure the building, fits in the categories. It's pretty basic. I'll show you that in a second. Second, you register on the program, just like anything else, username and password and so forth. We're using technology to drive a technology program. Third, you go through the questionnaire to complete the questionnaire as best as you can and to answer as many questions as best as you can. Then fourth, we'll send a verifier, and we're developing a cohort of verifiers to go out and make sure the questions were answered accurately. And then fifth, upon verification, you get certification. And it's a celebration point. It builds teams. It builds all the camaraderie and the goodwill, and it helps you benchmark yourself for success in this path that I've been describing. Next slide. So these may look familiar to some of you. We have the same asset types in BOMA Best Smart Buildings as in sustainable buildings. We have office buildings, we have shopping centers or retail. We have multi-unit residential buildings, MURBs, multi-unit residential buildings, apartment buildings and condos. We have open air retail. We have light industrial retail. That's part of the light industrial part of me. And we have healthcare buildings, and then we have universal, which is a catch-all category for none of the above, basically. So that could be that's a museum there. It could be a government building. We have a prison in our program and so forth. Go ahead, next slide. So in our remaining minutes, I'm just going to take you through quickly some of the buildings that are currently in the pilot. Pardon me. Just to give you a sense, the pilot is underway right now. We don't have results. The pilot will help us get our ducks in a row, make improvements, make changes, and then we'll have a public launch, a global launch, we expect next year. So I won't spend a lot of time on these buildings here, and so we'll move to the slides fairly quickly. But the Livermore, just to stay on that slide for a sec, is a new, wonderful, beautiful, high-end rental building in downtown Toronto. There's not a lot of rental buildings of this quality, and they were very excited. This is GWL Realty Advisors, one of the biggest, they're all extremely big real estate companies, and so they wanted to pilot this residential building, and they're in the pilot right now. Next slide. Place Ville-Marie in Montreal, Quebec, owned by Ivanhoe Cambridge, is the defining building of the Montreal skyline. It is absolutely iconic building, designed by the famous architect I.M. Pei, and so it's coming in. It's probably 50 years old. They just had a major refurbishment recently. It is BOMA Best BOMA Best Sustainable Buildings Platinum, of course. And so it's in the pilot right now. It's an enormous building in Montreal and a real gem. Next slide. So QuadReal, another huge company in Canada, has put in this new beautiful building, very modern building in downtown Vancouver. It's a really excellent office building. Next slide. Pardon me. This is an example of a different kind of building in the pilot. It's a mid-rise building in Calgary, and you can sort of see it's got different aspects at grade, 2 different towers, and pardon me, and it's in the pilot. Next slide. Pardon me, I'm sorry. Similarly, this is a suburban building. So this is not a downtown building. If you left downtown Toronto, it could take you an hour to get there. It's at the edge of Toronto, and you can see here, a typical suburban building. And this company, TrioVest, a major company in Canada, has it in the pilot. Next slide. What makes this building interesting for us is that it is in San Antonio. Pardon me, I'm so sorry. 1 second. It's in San Antonio, Texas. It's USAA's headquarters, so it's their actual headquarters for their real estate company. For those who know Joe Markling, former BOMA International chair, he works in that building, and he's put this building in as a pilot, so we have American representation. Next slide. Last but not least is a building that I'm sure many of you know, Servife's building, right in Mexico City. They are in the pilot. I don't think they've begun the pilot. We're staggering the pilot over time. We are over the moon that there's a Mexican building in the pilot, and we really want to capture the Mexican flavor of this program. And I should add as well, excuse me, that I was talking, pardon me, talking with Dominic Lau, who some of you may know, who runs BOMA China, and we could have a Chinese building in the pilot soon as well. Next slide. So this is just a quick note of some of the big companies all over the world. Those are not all the buildings in the pilot, but some really big companies across Canada and around the world who are sponsoring and or participating in the BOMA Best Smart Buildings project. Next slide. If you want to join or learn more, there's a website there. You can always email us or find us on social media as well. But we have so much interest, we've set up this special website. You see there. I'm so sorry. Next slide. And I guess now, Elsa, we'll move to the question and answer.
Correct, Benjamin. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very, very informative and very, near to our hearts here at IMEI BOMA Mexico, because we are a community that started 30 years ago from the smart building community. So we're very happy to see these pilots, and hopefully we will have the certification here also very soon. We have our first question. Disculpen, estoy hablando en inglés y necesito hablar español. Una disculpa. Muy bien. Ahora, Benjamín, vamos a leer las preguntas que tenemos del público. La primera es, hola, en el mundo de los edificios inteligentes hay varios protocolos de comunicación como KNX, BACnet, Zigbee. ¿Ves algún futuro en donde algún protocolo tome, digamos, la punta? ¿O podemos esperar el seguir trabajando con diferentes protocolos?
It's a really interesting and great question. I don't see the questions themselves, but whoever asked the question clearly has some depth of knowledge of this area. That the question itself makes that clear. So I'll be honest, I don't know those particular protocols myself, but I think that I could respond to the question, hopefully, with some intelligence by saying that I think that things like sustainability or smart buildings, and we have other stuff on the go too, they're not static. They're dynamic. They're always changing, and little by little over time, the industry will coalesce to create standards and hopefully the best rises to the top. the best, whether it's a process or a company or whatever. So our idea in creating BOMA Best Smart Buildings is to kind of be both cause and effect at the same time. So we want to reflect back to the industry what they're telling us, and in doing so, we set a standard. And so, to the specifics of the question, I have no idea. But at a general level, I think, our program, like the industry itself, will eventually either settle on a standardized way, call it a benchmark, for how to do that kind of stuff, and that'll be reflected in our questionnaire, or it won't, because for whatever reason, those items, can be different from company to company, building to building, or maybe even country to country. And so conceptually, I think those are the ways we'll go. But unfortunately, I can't speak to the specifics. Excuse me.
Sí, claro, sí, lo entendemos perfecto. Muchas gracias, Benjamín. Me gustaría pedirle a todas las personas que si tienen alguna pregunta, para eso pueden utilizar la sección de preguntas y respuestas o bien el chat. Tenemos una pregunta, bueno, agradece la persona que nos hizo la pregunta por la respuesta, y mientras los participantes ponen sus preguntas en el chat, a mí me gustaría preguntar, Benjamín, sobre la presentación, ¿qué sistemas están considerando ustedes para la certificación? Es decir, ¿será el sistema de control, los sistemas de seguridad? ¿Qué sistemas pueden estar incluidos?
The short answer, Elsa, is all of them. Our objective is not to create a list of systems and capture those systems. Our objective is to start with the idea of what can be captured within the rubric of a smart building, and that tells us what the systems are. And if there's a system that we haven't captured, we've got to capture it, because it's not fundamentally, the program is not fundamentally about a given system. It's all connected. It's connected through IoT, through Internet of Things. It's connected through excellence in property management, and it's connected to experience as well, to experience of the people in the building. So we're looking at it, and I think this is the right word, in a systematic way. Now, as we go through the pilot, and we have excellent people in the pilot, and we also have excellent experts who are guiding us in this journey, we may discover that one system is more important than another. And so, to the overall smart profile of the building. And so, we would provide heavier weighting in terms of questions or points or whatever on that one that's more important. But ultimately, because it's a web, you can't just sort of take this part of the web or the whole thing collapses. And so that's the reason why we're aspiring to capture the totality of the systems. And like anything else, Elsa, the program, it's smart buildings, it's trite to say, are not static themselves. They're always getting smarter. There's a building that will be smarter at the end of this webinar than it was at the beginning of the webinar. So we've got to work very hard in this constant race to keep our program current.
Entendimos. Muchísimas gracias, Benjamín. Tal vez otra pregunta que me gustaría poner aquí a tu consideración sería, ¿cuál es el camino a seguir por un edificio? ¿Sería mejor empezar por una certificación sustentable o tal vez empezar por la certificación de Smart Building?
It's a great question. So, look, the easy answer is, if your priority is sustainability, start on sustainability. If your priority is smart, start on smart. And that might be different for building 1 compared to building 2, or company 1 to company 2. However, I don't want to get too far ahead of our plans, but we will have an even better answer for you soon, because part of our plans, Elsa, is to integrate these programs. So not to combine them into one, but to actually have 2 or maybe even 3 certifications on a common platform. We're working on that right now, where there is cross-reference between the different areas of assessment. So, you could start with, with sustainability, and you complete the process, and you get gold, let's say, but at the end of that, you may realize that as a result of doing the sustainability certification, we would tell you, congratulations on your gold certification. By the way, you've actually completed 33% or whatever of the SMART certification because of the cross references, and you're on your way to a platinum in the SMART, or on your way to a bronze, or whatever it is. And so we're trying to make it very, very efficient for you to leverage the programs with each other. And that's something that we're very excited about. Maybe there could be other areas beyond even just sustainability and SMART, to try to capture excellence in all these critical areas of building operations. And my thought on that one is stay tuned, and we'll have lots more information later next year.
Claro que sí, nos vamos a mantener pendientes. Hay una pregunta de Rubén Morón, precisamente que va en ese tema. Rubén, por favor, escríbenos si te quedó claro. Él preguntaba precisamente qué sinergias existirán entre BOMA Best Sustainable Buildings y BOMA Best Smart Buildings. Creo que con lo que comentaste ahora, Benjamín, se explica, pero vamos a esperar si nos da algún otro comentario. Sure. Y bueno, creo que son todas las preguntas.
Elsa, I will say, I could just jump in for 1 second, that before we even complete this sort of cross-referencing that I described, we are, of course, leveraging the content of the programs off each other. So the sustainability portion of smart buildings is directly linked, not linked in the questionnaire, but the content is consistent across the programs already. So there's already a built-in advantage that way.
Perfecto, muy bien, nos queda muy claro. Bueno, tal vez la última pregunta sería para las personas que no están aún muy inclinadas por todo lo que son los parámetros tecnológicos. ¿Qué peso va a llevar la parte tecnológica en la certificación? Es decir, estamos hablando de todo lo que son los gemelos digitales, el IoT, inteligencia artificial. ¿Qué peso crees que tenga esta parte de la certificación? Digamos, en porcentaje o en alguna forma que nos puedas comentar.
I off the top of my head, I'm not sure. It's not going to be a secret. Okay, everything BOMA Canada does is open book. And so while it's not public yet, that's only because we haven't finalized it yet. We've got to get the pilot to tell us what the outcome. So as soon as it's done, you can download it for free off the website and see for yourself. So I don't really know that I can tell you at this moment what the relative weight is. But if I heard the first part of the question correctly, there seemed to be sort of a, how do you start this? What if you aren't, if I understood correctly, what if you aren't far down your path? Because you saw some pretty impressive buildings in the slideshow. We used to hear that on the sustainability side. We don't hear that anymore very often. My response to that kind of question is just start, just start. Because how else could you get going? Every once in a while, someone used to say to us years ago, first we'll become sustainable and then we'll get certified, because we don't want to get a low score, or we're too nervous about it, or whatever it is. And, my response is that's sort of like saying, first I'll get in shape and then I'll step on the bathroom scale. No, you got to measure yourself, and it's okay to get on, to get in the program at day one and recognize that you have a journey to go. And the program is designed not to assess you today, not only to assess you today, but to also give you a pathway for when you recertify to how you can start becoming smarter and better and more efficient.
Sí, creo que captaste la idea. Sería un llamado a la acción precisamente para todos nuestros espectadores el día de hoy, y que lo consideren. Muy bien, pues no veo otras preguntas aquí de la audiencia. Benjamín, nuevamente te agradezco mucho por tu tiempo, por tu disposición y por esta información tan importante que nos has compartido del día de hoy. Y no me queda más que agradecerles a todos ustedes por estar con nosotros. Les deseo que tengan un excelente día y nos vemos pronto, de hecho el jueves, en el siguiente webinar que también tenemos en alianza con AMPIB, AMEFIBRA y SEI, y vamos a estar hablando acerca de la sustentabilidad. Muchísimas gracias y que tengan un excelente día.
Gracias. Thank you so much. Gracias.